Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and be able to set the stage a little bit about what are some of the trends we're seeing within play and learn, and how can all of us make a difference, especially in this within a pandemic, and for hopefully also in the post-pandemic environment. I'll go ahead and share my presentation. Great. Just 1 second as we're all keeping up with the increasing demand for our bandwidth. So as I said, I'm going to talk about just for about 10 minutes about play and learn during the pandemic. What are some of the emerging needs and some of the emerging trends that are coming to solve those very key needs? So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Canopy Lab. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the expert on future of learning with Singularity University. And I also serve on the board of DI Digital, which is the Confederation of Danish Industry. And I try to specialize at the intersection between learning and play and artificial intelligence, and how we use new emerging and converging technologies to ultimately promote our goals, which to me are enhancing 21st century skills and ensuring that no child gets left behind, which is very tied to the 2030 agenda. So very briefly, this is not about Canopy Lab, but we are a Danish edtech from 2015. And we do two things. We sell learning platforms to private companies and educational institutions. And with the pandemic, we've experienced that huge shift. So we have, now service over 200 schools, which was a completely new segment for us just as a result of the pandemic. But we also created a free channel called The Lab, where we have partnerships with over 80 NGOs that make very essential content for youth, especially during the pandemic, about mental health and sustainability and the future of our planet. So sort of almost overnight, sections of the world began to shut down. In January and February, I was at our office in Vietnam as the pandemic hit. And I was actually at a conference in the United States as Europe was being shut down. And I don't think even those of us in learning fathomed how it would influence what we do and the responsibility all of us will have to ensure that there is some sort of harmony between pedagogy and learning and play while everyone's sent home and teachers and parents are working overtime. A lot of pioneers, a lot of researchers have come before us and sort of been a guiding star. So UNESCO has long argued that learning through play is powerful, that it's healthy for the children's development, and it's especially healthy in a crisis, and that we can't forget that we have to learn in a holistic way. So all of a sudden, when all of not just kids, but teens and lifelong learners are sent home overnight, the same principles as we have known are true when we're together are also true when we are apart. So while many of us first, the answer to continued learning through the pandemic was to look for the massive online open course movement, even if it's in version 1.0 or 2.0 or 3.0, many of us will automatically go there and say, well, then we'll just put all of the world's students into a learning management system and everything will be all right. We'll figure it out. But we have to remember that online learning management systems have been criticized for their pedagogy, and that in fact, on an open learning platform, about 93% of everyone drops out. So we actually are forced to think about learning in a different way and think more critically about the interplay between learning and play. So Jack Ma, already at the World Economic Forum in 2018, said education is a big challenge now. If we don't change the way we learn, 30 years later, we'll be in trouble. I don't think he knew it would be 2 years later we'll be in trouble. But there was already this sense that a lot of the tools we rely on for learning aren't adequate in the digital sphere. And while technology is moving very fast and all of the systems and all of the games are improving very rapidly, usually, like there are still some fundamental underlying problems with a lot of them. One of them being that they tend to heavily favor knowledge over skills. And what I mean by that is that a lot of them are built to just test that you understood the transmission of a key piece of knowledge. For example, I learn something about, let's say, IoT, and then the systems are designed to confirm that I understood that knowledge, but not so much through interactive exercises and games that give me new skills. So I want master 21st century skills necessarily by learning through a learning management system. So there's a big call for something has to change. And the World Bank has actually come out after the onset of the pandemic and said that remote learning requires a reimagination of education. And that is very much how we see all of you come into play, because all of us here on this call will redefine and reimagine the future of education and learning and play through our solutions. So some of the emerging huge trends that I've spotted since the pandemic are, for example, the integration of learn and play at the highest level. I think the Kahoot announcement of their Zoom integration is one of the most excellent examples of this. We're taking Zoom, which can be very static and very much for the transmission of knowledge. And by announcing a Kahoot integration, they are putting play directly into a format that can be extremely boring and very hard to keep the students' focus. So this intersection, new kinds of partnerships, you mentioned it as well with the Angry Birds and NASA, partners you wouldn't maybe before the pandemic have thought that they would hook up with each other. But all of a sudden we see these new interesting plays and channels. We witnessed an upsurge in educational games in the categories of literacy and language, math, science, history, and physical education. And while parents are often skeptical of leaving their children too long with a game or in front of the computer or even in front of YouTube, a recent study out of the United Kingdom on literacy actually showed that 35% of children who play video games believe that they are better readers due to their interaction with games. The study also found that more than half of the participants read and write materials related to gaming at least once per month. So while it's healthy for us to keep studying, the counter effects of too much gaming, such as on our motoric skills, we actually have also historically been very hard and critical of what takes place in a gaming universe. We've also seen countless new studies that show that the social relations among students who are now, distributed away from each other is strong through gaming, where they still co-create and play. Another trend I want to highlight briefly before I'm almost out of time is also the move. So we've seen Zoom merge up with Kahoot, but here we're seeing a gaming company move closer to a straight learning play. So Lingo Kids, one of my absolute favorite apps that I use religiously with my kids, have just raised $10 million to expand into project-based learning. So they originally started as a language learning app, but they've expanded their repertoire quite a lot. But that reshift of focus of being just on language to basically could be any category of content, but supporting the project-based learning approach is extremely interesting. And it's aligned with a lot of the things that are happening across platforms right now. A couple of very fast examples I want to highlight. We will not succeed with learn or play in a remote setting unless we upskill teachers. Teachers are at the forefront of taking us safely through this pandemic. One thing that I've been a part of launching is Teacher Lab, which is a free channel for teachers by teachers that launched in July and has just over 20,000 teachers now. But it's an interactive free platform where teachers are taught how to do project-based learning and collaboration in the virtual world. Because we can't forget that most teachers have never received that training. So we have to help lift them into this new world as well. Finally, we're seeing new tech being used in different ways to save teachers time. Here I have an example of a bot we created in Canopy Lab. So this is in the course creation mode. Using artificial intelligence, natural language processing, we can almost auto-generate an entire course for you based on the content, kind of like a self-driving car. You put it in on the top and then it builds on its own. But here we build an AI bot modeled on our course creator at the office, Lise. So she can answer all your important questions about what is an engaging exercise, what kind of pedagogy should I use in my courses. So all those things that best course designer has, you can actually ask her those kinds of questions. And that's designed to spare teachers of a lot of the tasks around designing the system to give them more interactive face time with students. A final thing I want to highlight is that, as you're expanding during this exciting time where investors want to pour in money in edtech, think about how to do it in a smart way. Another slight thing we found out that saved a lot of teachers' time is that we build an algorithm that can auto-create a pedagogical exercise. So a pedagogical exercise we have on Canopy Lab called defining is to ensure students understand key concepts of a text. So here we put in materials from the course I just showed you on gender and identity, and based on the videos and the text, the AI engine created the question in your own words: what's the difference between gender and sex? So while we tend to think about games and play as a game, I also think about it as a gamified way of making some of these boring systems much easier to operate. So how will you make a difference during COVID? How will you elevate your project or your idea or your business to the next level? I'm super excited about following the day and hearing all of your exciting ideas.